welcome to the Explainer. So today we are diving into what is honestly one of the most fascinating David versus Goliath stories in all of modern tech. You know, for years, the story of artificial intelligence has been completely, totally dominated by the American West Coast. But what happens when three brilliant researchers decide to leave the comfort of Silicon Valley's most powerful labs, fly all the way back to Europe, and build a frontier AI company completely from scratch? Well, today we are unpacking the story of Mistral AI. This is the Paris-based lab that didn't just challenge the tech giants, but actively reshaped the entire global AI landscape. Okay, let's dive into this. 105 million euros. I mean, just let that number sink in for a second, because this staggering figure is where our story truly accelerates. Back in June 2023, Mistral closed this exact amount in its seed funding round. To put that into perspective for you, it was literally the largest seed round in European AI history. But here's the crazy part. When that massive check was written, Mistral had exactly 3 employees, 0 revenue, and absolutely 0 products. I mean, how do you command that kind of capital on day one? Well, to answer that, we really have to look at the environment these founders were rebelling against. Section 1. The Silicon Valley Monopoly, the Shift to Closed AI. If you trace the modern AI boom back, well, everything really kicks off in June 2017. That is when Google published their famous Attention is All You Need paper. This introduced the transformer architecture, which is basically the foundational building block for all modern AI. Meanwhile, you had OpenAI pivoting over to commercial products, which obviously culminated in November 2022 when ChatGPT launched and hit 100 million users at just record-breaking speed. But, as you might guess, this massive success had a major side effect. It rapidly concentrated power and a whole lot of capital right into the hands of a few heavily capitalized American labs. Now, this shift sparked a pretty stark philosophical divide in the tech world. See, in the early days, the AI community really thrived on an ethos of open-weight releases and freely accessible research. It was very collaborative. But as these models became exponentially more powerful and, let's be real, highly profitable, the gates started to close. Modern US AI labs began locking their systems behind proprietary APIs, using safety rationales to limit distribution. Suddenly, everyday developers were basically locked out of the engine room. And for 3 specific researchers who are watching all of this unfold from inside the big tech machine, this shift was the ultimate signal that it was time to make a move. All right, Section 2, the French defection, returning to Paris. Now, these founders, they brought an incredibly elite pedigree to the table. Arthur Mensch, Guillaume Lampley, and Timothy Lacrosse actually met back at École Polytechnique, which is France's premier engineering school. But their professional impact was even bigger than that. Mensch was over at Google DeepMind leading the work on the famous Chinchilla paper, which completely reshaped how models are trained to be compute optimal. Lampley and Lacroix were at Meta's AI lab, acting as the core architects behind Llama, which really became the gold standard for foundation models. So we're not just talking about regular employees here. These guys were literally the architects of big tech's foundation models. So by early 2023, they looked around and realized that the timing was absolutely perfect to build a European alternative. In April of that year, they flew home to Paris, pooled 8.5 million euros of their very own capital, and deliberately chose a name that represented a powerful, natural European force. A Mistral is a strong, cold wind that sweeps down from the northwest, through the Rhone Valley, and right into the Mediterranean. It's a force of nature, powerful, disruptive, and deeply local, which is exactly what they intended their new company to be. Now, because they sprang up so incredibly fast, there was naturally a lot of early skepticism. People were whispering, wait, are they just building a clone on top of OpenAI's work? But the answer to that is a definitive, absolute no. While they do rely on the foundational transformer architecture, I mean, pretty much everyone does, Mistral didn't use any licensed or derivative work from OpenAI. Drawing on their own distinct research backgrounds, they build their own model implementations entirely independently, right from the ground up. Moving on to Section 3. The model lineage, punching above their weight. Literally just months after incorporating in September 2023, they dropped their very first public model, Mistral 7B. This was a 7 billion parameter open-weight model distributed under a super permissive Apache 2.0 license. This meant developers all over the world could actually download it and modify it themselves. But the real shockwave? Independent evaluators quickly confirmed that Mistral 7B was actively outperforming American competitors that were literally twice its size. This was the exact moment the global AI community woke up and realized Mistral was the real deal. And from there, they just expanded their arsenal at lightning speed. By mid-2026, they dropped Mistral, which used a really clever mixture of experts architecture to deliver massive performance, but at a much lower compute cost. Then came Mistral Large for heavy, sustained reasoning and enterprise use cases. They launched Codistral, a model specialized specifically for code generation. And they even jumped right into the consumer space with LeChat, their very own AI assistant product. They brilliantly managed to straddle both worlds, giving open-weight developer models to the community while also successfully deploying high-end proprietary models for big enterprise. Section 4. State-backed tech sovereignty, the cornerstone of France 2030. Now, what's really interesting about this is how this story evolves beyond just tech. Mistral evolved from a startup into a literal matter of strategic national pride. French President Emmanuel Macron became a hugely vocal champion, even calling their work French genius. In fact, at the Paris AI Action Summit in February 2025, Macron actually went on television and explicitly urged citizens to stop using ChatGPT and to download Mistral's LaceShot instead. I mean, imagine a world leader basically doing tech support for a local startup. And the crazy thing is, it worked. But, this relationship goes a lot deeper than just presidential endorsements. The French government actively cultivated this entire ecosystem. They stepped in to help shape the EU AI Act so that open-weight models would face lighter compliance burdens. And then, in January 2026, the French Ministry of Armed Forces actually signed a framework contract with Mistral for cyber defense. The strict, non-negotiable condition here was that the data never, ever leaves French territory. Mistral accepted, of course, deploying strictly on sovereign infrastructure and really cementing themselves as a true strategic national asset. Which leads us to this truly massive number, 18,000. That is the staggering number of NVIDIA Grace Blackwell superchips that are currently powering Mistral compute. To fulfill those strict sovereign defense contracts, Mistral went ahead and built out a massive 40-megawatt data center located directly on French soil, in Assonne. Just think about that for a second. In less than 3 years, a company that started with 3 guys and 0 products was suddenly operating proprietary, state-of-the-art AI infrastructure on physical French soil. Which brings us to Section 5, the independence question. Can the third way survive? You really have to look at this jaw-dropping 28-month trajectory because it is absolutely phenomenal. They went from that €105 million seed round in June 2023 to a massive Series B in 2024. All the way up to an €11.7 billion valuation in their Series C round by September 2025. This explosion in value officially made Mistral the absolute largest AI startup anywhere outside the San Francisco Bay Area. It is a spectacular financial arc. But as we all know, rapid scaling in frontier AI requires an unimaginable amount of cash. And that brings us to a massive, frankly, undeniable irony at the center of this whole story. To fight Goliath and build this sovereign European third way, Mistral kind of had to take Goliath's money. Microsoft took a position which actually sparked scrutiny from the EU Commission over market concentration. Andreessen Horowitz, an absolute titan of US venture capital, led their Series B. And you have heavyweights like NVIDIA, IBM, and Salesforce deeply integrated now. Even though the Dutch semiconductor giant ASML led their Series C, the reality is clear. The company built to be the sovereign European alternative has taken hundreds of millions from the very American consolidation it positioned itself against. So what does this all mean for the future? Mistral absolutely proved that Europe could build a frontier AI lab. They brought the elite talent home, they secured the state-backed defense contracts, and they built the sovereign infrastructure. But as these frontier models get exponentially more expensive to train, and as enterprise deployments demand deeper and deeper integration with the big tech establishment, can this third way truly maintain its independence at scale? The Mistral wind has proven for sure that it can blow fiercely through the tech industry. But in a landscape moving faster than any single lab can pace, can it blow consistently? That is a question we will all be watching very, very closely. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.